Alkinaz perspective. So, Victor. I smile at the brightly shining man who's looking out of my office's window, at the swirling clouds of interstellar haze with a contemplative expression. Did you enjoy the time you spent with Toon's family? I did, he states, swerving his head away from the window without moving the rest of his body. Definitely pretty tired with how packed with activities it was, but I had the absolute time of my life. Performed for a straight 30 minutes for a hall full of people and got some genuine sounding compliments on it. Playing the grandfather of England's first king in a reenactment. Helped a baby troll out of a ravine, crevasse. Some sort of V-shaped geographic feature that was too small for me to call it a gorge. Got on the local news, went on the Don Reservation. Saw a kilometre-wide field, 600 metres tall at least. Fought single combat with Toon's brother. I'm sorry, could I ask you to elaborate on that last one? I say, more alarmed than I allow myself to sound. He gives an amused smile and answers, It's a tradition for Don. They're patriarchal, like humans used to be, so they've got this conception of any woman as being defended by the male head of her household. It makes a little more sense when you see male and female Dons side by side. Their sexual dimorphism's a bit more pronounced than in humans, though the men ain't anywhere near as much bigger and stronger than the women as your species women are than your men. It sort of makes sense that this tradition would exist. Like, fathers wouldn't want to give their daughters to guys that couldn't defend them. Does seem a bit antiquated to me, though. Like, sort of seems like a hang-up from a time when the state didn't function well enough for folk to rely on it for law enforcement. Anyway, Toon's brother and me were talking at the feast. He's a bit deadpan and don't say much, but seems like a decent bloke. He brought it up and let me know that, while he personally didn't mind, I need to do this combat ritual if I wanted his community to accept me being with Toon. So, yeah, I did it. Fought a king in exile, in single combat. Well, I say, not quite sure how to respond to that. That's certainly something. Silently, he gives a nod, lip curled in a mirthful smirk of something indeed. So, I assume you won. Yeah, I won. Though there was this one guy who weren't happy, said Toon's brother gave up too easily. Her big sis put him in his place, though. Fucking hilarious seeing him get chided like that, he smiles. And did anything else noteworthy happen while you were on that planet? I see his eyes shift focus and can tell they're not fixed on anything in the room, but rather something his mind is showing him. A warm smile breaks over his bright hot face. Yeah, I can't tell you about it though. I promised I'd keep it secret and didn't want to ask can I tell my therapist about this, for a few different reasons. Toon's brother and sister who are married to each other, but before you ask, they're different species and not legally siblings. They showed us something incredible. It was just about the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Only vying with Toon herself for the top spot. It gave me, like, this euphoria. I think I might be able to guess what the secret is. As part of an interspecies union myself, I can well imagine the feeling. Rather than voicing my supposition, I say, it sounds like this secret, whatever it is, affected you greatly. It did, he confirms happily. Would you like to talk more about it? He shakes his head. Can't really say anything more. Don't trust myself not to accidentally let the cat out of the bag. You met the new crew? I shake my head. Bjorn, Mimir, Torbjörn, and Lilith Unicorn Morningstar? I've seen their files, but we haven't been introduced. Have you met them? He nods. They're good folk. Bjorn's actually one of Katrin's congregants. He also had her as a lecturer way back in the day. Decades before the war. Katrin? He shuts his eyes and briefly brings his palm to his forehead, seeming to be mildly exasperated with himself. One of Toon's mums. Thought I mentioned her to you. The other one's Heidi. I gave a reassuring smile. You've definitely mentioned both of Toon's mums before, but I don't recall you ever having mentioned their names. No matter, though, I know now. He gives an appreciative nod, followed by a few moments of conversational lull. So, Victor, do you remember what we talked about in our last session? I ask, careful to make sure my tone suggests I'd be happy to remind him, and not that I think he needs to be reminded, and certainly not that I need to be reminded. He nods and begins recapping without my having to prompt. We were talking about my sense of self-worth. I said having Toon say she loved me for the first time was the proudest I've ever been of myself. You asked me to come up with something else I was proud of myself for as homework. I smile and give him some praise. Well done, Victor. So, have you come up with anything? Asking after a client's homework is always one of the most tricky times to manage your tone. It's absolutely imperative that you don't imply for even an instant that you'll be angry or upset with them if they haven't done their homework. Few things make a human more uneasy than facing up to an uncompleted assignment. I have, he smiles. I, Victor Cuddles Taylor, am the pilot of the official ODR-endorsed Terran Security Officer program. And what makes that something you're proud of? I ask sweetly. Well, he responds, I never really expected to amount to much. I planned to sign up as a soldier when I turned old enough. No shade to soldiers, but it ain't exactly something I planned to do because I was, passionate about it. More like something I planned to do because I couldn't think what else to do with myself. I know when we had our first session, I described becoming the first official SO as dumb luck, but I've been thinking about it since. And I definitely still think running into Taqual while she were looking for someone like me and getting mugged were dumb luck. But I've had a bit of an attitude shift about everything after that. He pauses for a moment, so I prompt, What has your attitude shifted to? Well, I always thought that, surely, if I could do the SO course, anyone could. And you don't think that anymore? He shakes his head. I don't. And why is that? I ask curiously. I just had a bit of a think about the amount of work I had to do. It's easy to forget, but there were a million times on that course that I almost chucked in the towel and said it weren't for me. I don't think I'd have been able to stick it out if I weren't motivated. And you were motivated? I asked. Yep, he responds with conviction. What would you say motivated you, Victor? What gave you the drive to persevere through those moments? I say, tenting my manipulated digits and leaning forward. That, he says, matching my lean, would be because I finally had something to aspire to that weren't... He raises a hand. Human super soldier, he says, gesturing through the air, with mock grandiosity to an imaginary title. I give a little chuckle and ask, You felt pigeonholed? That being a human cut down the things you felt allowed to aspire to be? Yeah, you gotta remember I was born during the war. By the time I was 10, humanity had known we were space orcs for 15 years, and people just weren't bored of it yet. But you were. He thinks for a moment before he leans back in his chair and answers. I was, yeah. Just, people conflated us being stronger than just about anyone else with us being wholly better, you know. It was boring to me. You don't think your species is better than any others? I ask inquisitively. His mouth twists as he considers the question. Nature don't really do better, in the sense that evolution don't inherently value strength, toughness, vigor, or nothing. If they don't actually help you survive. The reasons Neanderthals don't default to looking like Fran and Sapiens don't default to looking like this, he gestured to himself, is because it ain't efficient. I've got to eat 5,000 calories a day to maintain this. Fran's more like 8,000 calories. We'd be the first to starve in a famine. Don't matter that we've got more strength to get food if there ain't food to get. Even intelligence ain't something inherently valuable. We should be obvious from how rare it is. All these things only have the value we give them, if they don't actively help us survive. Being made of the sturdiest stuff of any sapien don't make us any better than anyone else. I mean, as much as a person from a class 4 would die, very quickly, if you left them alone on a planet like Earth, a human would die on a class 4 because none of the food would be worth the calories it'd cost to chew. We'd starve. We spent 700 years looking for ET, all the time imagining we'd be more or less at the top of the bell curve. Average in all things. Never realizing that we were so far up the long tail that we broke the classification system. We never imagined that the hump of the bell curve actually sat around high class 5, that there'd be such a massive gulf between us and those from the next most hazardous world. That the planets we'd gone to and said sapiens couldn't possibly evolve here. What problems are there here that it'd be needed to solve? Were planets that the rest of the galaxy would have considered adversarial to sapiens? Growing up, I wanted to go starbound, but from the way everyone talked, both the kids I went to school with and any garden models I found talking about us on the net, it was clear that what we were valued for weren't anything more than being strong, being tough. He trails off here, so I prompt, And Taqual made you feel that she would prize you for more than those attributes. She did, he says emphatically. Like, after I chased off the kids trying to mug her, she led me back to this sky piercer in Westminster and introduced me to the Gian Blitz Miyazaki and her husband. I was definitely starstruck. They explained that they needed a human because a human's brains are hardwired to be good at spotting threats. It was like an epiphany. I could go starbound without being a mercenary or assassin or nothing. There was another niche for me. Something else that, coming from a death world, had equipped me for. Equipped all humans for. We could be something other than super soldiers. We could be health and safety officers. We could give other species the benefit of being the product of an accidental 3 billion year long Viltrumites eugenics experiment. I'm proud of that. Viltrumites? I query. They're like evil Kryptonians. You know Kryptonians? Superman species? I know Kryptonians. Is there a reason you compared your species to Viltrumites and not Kryptonians? I ask, my tone quizzical. Well, I guess, because on Krypton, Kryptonians are just normal. I mean, they're just like humans back when we thought human was a synonym of average. It's only being on a planet with a yellow sun that turns Kal-El into Superman. Viltrumites are the way they are all the time. But aren't humans just normal on Earth? I inquire. Yeah, but that's different. It's the context of being surrounded by others like us in a world that produced us that makes us just normal. It ain't like Kryptonians who are physiologically changed by the difference between their sun and ours. So you think Viltrumites are a better fit because they're always on? They're the Death Worlders that Death Worlders imagined, wherever they happen to be? I guess so, he answers uncertainly. And it has nothing to do with them being, as you put it, evil? He shakes his head. Nah, I mean, I sort of oversimplified. There are good Viltrumites, and it ain't like Kryptonians are entirely good. One of Superman's main enemies is an evil general who survived Krypton's destruction by being banished for his crimes. So both Kryptonians and Viltrumites are people. Complicated, messy, and possible to holistically define as good or evil? I ask. Yeah. Like humans? He hesitates for a while before confirming. Like humans, yes. I nod, satisfied. Of course, I heavily identify with the feelings he's describing, since I spent the first 3 centuries of my life in the same position. Spellbook were the humans before humans came along, the biggest and scariest monsters from a class 9.9, which only wasn't a 10 because that would have made it a death world, and sapiens don't evolve on death worlds. Our situations aren't exactly one-to-one. Spellbook's first contact was thousands of years before I was born, meaning that, by my time, our status as the galaxy's highest classification sapiens was quite a culturally settled idea. There wasn't the excitement I'm sure there was in the few generations after contact. I didn't truly wish to be a soldier any more than he did, but I simply accepted that that was my lot. It wasn't until after the war in that POW camp that the wish to be something other than a fighter reasserted itself, thanks to the species of the man sitting opposite me. I consider relaying all that to him, telling him how similar we are, but I rule against it. Therapy isn't about you. It's about your client, Archimad Dimitrescu Fisher. Focus on him. All right, Victor. How about you tell me about some of your proudest moments from your career?